Hello and welcome to this comprehensive Azure Fundamentals exam practice questions video. In this video, we will focus on a specific type of questions where you are presented with multiple statements related to an Azure service. And you need to determine whether each statement is correct or not. I'll provide detailed explanations for why each statement is right or wrong. In most cases, we will either validate through the Azure portal or refer to official Microsoft documentation to confirm the answer. Make sure to watch the entire video as it contains around 150 statements, and the practical exercises and documentation walkthroughs will prepare you for many variations of these questions as well. Let's dive right into the questions.
For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. You have multiple statements here. See, these statements are: PaaS solutions provide full control of operating system that host application. PaaS solution provides additional memory to apps by changing pricing tier. PaaS solutions can automatically scale the number of instances. So the right answers are now on your screen. With PaaS, you don't get access to underlying operating system as it is managed by Azure. You do have different pricing tiers in PaaS where the configuration can be changed based on your requirement, and you can avail extra memory, CPU, and so on. PaaS solutions automatically scale whenever needed. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Your statements are: you must install the software that you want to use with IaaS, infrastructure as a service. You must apply software updates when consuming SaaS service. Azure Backup is an example of PaaS. So the correct options are on your screen. With IaaS, you are responsible for installing and managing the software on top of infrastructure. So the statement is true. Second statement is false, as with SaaS vendor is responsible for managing the underlying software and hardware, and consumers just subscribe to the service. Azure Backup is an example of PaaS service. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Your statements are: with a consumption-based plan, you pay a fixed rate for all data sent to or from virtual machines hosted in the cloud. With a consumption-based plan, you reduce overall costs by paying only for extra capacity when it is required. Serverless computing is an example of consumption-based plan. So the right answers are on your screen. As the name indicates, consumption-based model is pay as you go. So first statement is incorrect. You only pay based on the amount of data transferred and how the data is transferred. Serverless computing is built based on per second resource consumption and execution. So yes, this is the example of consumption-based plan. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the first statement is: Azure provides flexibility between CapEx and OpEx. Let's first understand what is CapEx and OpEx. CapEx, or capital expenditure in layman terms, is company's long-term expense or upfront cost. Some of the examples of CapEx are physical data center, storage, or network costs, whereas operational expenditure, which is also called as OpEx, there is no upfront cost, but you pay for the service as you use it, which is why the first statement is correct, as all the cloud providers enable you to move from CapEx to OpEx model. Moving on to the next statement in the list. If you create two Azure virtual machines that use E2S underscore V3 size, each VM will generate same monthly cost. Both the virtual machines can have different monthly cost even after having same size, as they could have different disk or networking configuration attached to them. So the second statement is false. Next statement. When a virtual machine is stopped, you continue to pay storage costs associated to the virtual machine. While the VM is shut down, there is still a storage cost for the disk that is holding the virtual hard drive file, as well as any other data storage disks you may have created, as you are still consuming the file storage. If you delete them before shutting down the VM, then you won't be billed for storage. So this statement is correct. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the first statement is a company can extend the capacity of its internal network by using public cloud. Yes, this statement is correct, as this is an example of hybrid cloud model. Now, the second statement is only guest users at your company can access the resources of the cloud in a public cloud model. Resources in the public cloud can be accessed by anyone from anywhere with appropriate credentials and authorization. So this statement is incorrect. A company must always migrate from a private cloud model to achieve a hybrid cloud model. No, the statement is incorrect. While hybrid cloud is a combination of public and private cloud, but it is not necessary to start with private cloud. You can always start with public cloud and then later on bring things in-house in a private cloud model. The following statements, you need to select yes if the statement is true, otherwise you need to select no. So the first statement is each Azure subscription can contain multiple account administrators. You can have co-administrators. However, there can only be one account administrator. So this statement is incorrect. An Azure subscription can contain multiple resource groups. Yes, that's correct. A subscription can have multiple resource groups. If you want to understand more about nesting of subscriptions, resources, and resource groups in Azure, then look at my video related to hierarchy in Azure. I'll add the link for the video in the description of this one. The third statement is an Azure subscription can be managed by using a Microsoft account only. You need an Active Directory account to manage a subscription, not a Microsoft account. An account is created in the Azure Active Directory when you create the subscription. So the statement is incorrect. For each of the following statements, you need to select yes if the statement is true, otherwise you need to select no. So the first statement is a user account can be assigned to multiple Azure roles. Yes, you can assign a user account to multiple Azure roles. A resource group can have the owner role assigned to multiple users. Yes, multiple users can have owner role on a resource group. The third statement, you can create custom Azure roles to control access to resources. Yes, you can create custom roles in Azure if the built-in roles don't meet your requirements. The first statement is, if you assign permissions to a user to manage a resource group, the user can manage all resources in that resource group. Yes, that's correct. If you apply any permission on the resource group level, then the permission gets inherited to the resources contained in that resource group. Next statement, if you assign a tag to a resource group, all the resources in that resource group are assigned the same tag. No, this statement is incorrect. Unlike permissions, which we discussed in previous statement, resources within a resource group don't inherit the tags. Next statement, all the resources deployed in a Azure resource group must use the same Azure region. Again, no, the statement is incorrect. Resources can be deployed in multiple locations and reside in same resource group. They can also be deployed in any location, irrespective of the location of the resource group. So let's start with first statement. Data transfers between Azure services located in different Azure regions is always free. No, the statement is incorrect. You are charged when you are moving data from one region to another region. Now, on your screen, you can see a snippet from Microsoft website, which is telling about the different prices from transferring data from one region to another region. Prices vary whether you are doing a intercontinental data transfer or you are doing a intracontinental data transfer. But the bottom line is any transfer between regions is chargeable. Let's look at next statement. North America is represented by a single Azure region. No, this statement is again incorrect. North America has several Azure regions, including West US, Central US, South Central US, East US, and Canada East. Now, the third statement is every Azure region has multiple data centers. Yes, this statement is correct. Each Azure region features data centers deployed with a latency defined parameter. They are connected through a dedicated regional low latency network. This design ensures that Azure services within any region offer the best possible performance and security. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the first statement is a DNS server that runs on an Azure virtual machine is an example of platform as a service. No, the statement is incorrect. A DNS server running on an Azure virtual machine is an example of infrastructure as a service. In infrastructure as a service, you have control over the virtual infrastructure where you manage the operating system, runtime environment, and applications running on the VM. In this case, you would deploy and configure a virtual machine on Azure to run the DNS server software, taking responsibility for the installation, maintenance, and management of the server. Now, the next statement is Microsoft Intune is an example of software as a service. Yes, this statement is correct. As a SaaS offering, Microsoft Intune is delivered over the internet as a subscription-based service. Users can access and use Intune through a web portal or dedicated applications without the need for on-premise infrastructure or software installation. The next statement is Azure Files is an example of infrastructure as a service. No, this statement is incorrect. Azure Files is not an example of infrastructure as a service, but rather a specific service offered by Microsoft Azure that falls under the category of platform as a service. Azure Files is a cloud-based file sharing service that allows you to create and manage file shares in the cloud. It provides a fully managed file storage solution that can be accessed from multiple virtual machines or services within Azure or even from an on-premise environment. So folks, you would have already seen that there are few questions around different type of these offerings, whether it is a platform as a service or infrastructure as a service or software as a service. So it is highly recommended you know what these cloud computing models are and you understand them in detail. So go through my video as you can expect to see some questions around this in the exam.
This is question number 261 of the series, friends. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And the first statement is availability zones are implemented in all regions. This statement is incorrect, friends. Not all regions support availability zones at the moment. So on your screen is a table showing the regions that currently support availability zones. And if I click on Azure geographies, you can see there are a lot more geographies than what you could see in the table, if you go to Asia Pacific region, you have East Asia, you have Southeast Asia. Similarly, if you go to Australia, you have Australia Central, Australia East, Australia Southeast. If you go to India, you have Central India, India South Central, South India. And if I go back, you can see when we were talking about Asia Pacific, there was only Central India mentioned from that zone. Similarly, there are many more regions missing here, which were there in the global footprint of Azure. So we can safely say that not all the regions support availability zones. Now, the next statement is only virtual machines that run Windows Server can be created in availability zones. And friends, this statement is also incorrect. You can run Linux VMs as well in availability zones. The third statement is availability zones are used to replicate data and applications to multiple regions. And this statement is also incorrect because region pairs are used to replicate data and applications to multiple regions, not availability zones. Availability zones replicate your data within a region. Friends, as usual, pay attention to keywords. If we change multiple regions to within a region, then this statement becomes true. And the first statement is data that is stored in an Azure storage account automatically has at least 3 copies. That's correct, folks. At least 3 copies of data are maintained when stored in an Azure storage account. All data that is copied to an Azure storage account is backed up automatically to another Azure data center. This statement is incorrect, friends. By default, locally redundant storage is selected for a storage account, which replicates your data 3 times within the same data center. You have the option to choose geo-redundant storage or read access geo-redundant storage, which replicates your data to another data center in a different region for additional protection against regional disasters or outages. And the third statement is an Azure storage account can contain up to 2 terabyte of data and up to 1 million files. This one is also incorrect, friends. Keyword which made this statement incorrect is the word up to 2 TB of data. Default maximum storage account capacity is 5 petabytes of data. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And your first statement is Azure Advisor can generate a list of Azure VMs that are protected by Azure Backup. Friends, Azure Advisor does the other way around. It provides recommendations on virtual machines that are not backed up and will let you enable backup on these virtual machines with just a few clicks. The second statement is if you implement the security recommendations provided by Azure Advisor, your company's secure score will decrease. This statement is also incorrect. If you implement the security recommendations provided by Azure Advisor, your company's secure score in Azure will typically increase. And the third statement is to maintain Microsoft support, you must implement the security recommendations provided by Azure Advisor within a period of 30 days. Folks, this statement is also incorrect. It is not mandatory to implement the recommendations provided by Azure Advisor. And the first statement is in an Azure virtual machine scale set, the virtual machines are configured identically. And this statement is correct, my friends. Let's look at next statement. The number of Azure virtual machines in a virtual machine scale set can increase automatically. This statement is also correct. And the third statement is the number of Azure virtual machines in a virtual machine scale set can decrease automatically. And this statement is also correct. So friends, I am now in Azure portal and in the creating a virtual machine scale set wizard. Let's try to create a virtual machine scale set and see and validate the options that we chose while answering question number 287. So the first one was in an Azure virtual machine scale set, the virtual machines are configured identically. Now, if you scroll down in the wizard in the instance details, you have to select an image. And if you click on this, it says choose the base operating system or application for the VM. This pretty much confirms that whenever new virtual machines will be spinned up by this virtual machine scale set, it is going to use the same image for all the machines. That means these all machines will be replica of each other. Now, the next part, basically, the next two statements were the number of Azure virtual machines in a virtual machine scale set can increase automatically or can decrease automatically. So for that, we will look at the scaling options. What is scaling mode? Manual scale contains a fixed instance count. Custom scale, auto scale allows to scale the capacity of virtual machine scale sets on any schedule based on any metrics. So there are two options here: manually update the capacity, maintain a fixed number of instances, or auto scaling. So let's look at auto scaling because the question was talking about it can change the virtual machine instances, whether it is increasing or decreasing automatically. Now, if you select auto scaling, there are predefined settings showing up here. Let's click on configure and see whether we can change those settings or not. So it comes up with a default condition. And if I try to edit the default condition, you can see the initial instance count of the virtual machine scale set is defined as 2. That means when the virtual machine scale set is initialized, it will have 2 virtual machines in it. And here the maximum defines that whenever the scaling actions happens, which we will shortly see, the maximum instances that can be attained using those scaling actions is 20. You cannot go beyond 20. Now, scale out is defined as if the CPU threshold is greater than 80%, the number of virtual machines will increase by 1. And similarly, the scale-in is defined as if the CPU threshold is less than 20%, the number of VMs will decrease by 1. And query duration is set to 10. This is the duration of time the autoscale engine will look back for the metric usage average. This is to allow your metrics to stabilize. Basically, this is a cool down period. And then at the bottom, you can specify the schedule, but this is the auto created default condition, so we cannot modify it. Let's try to create a scaling condition and see if there are any different options. Now here you can see in the schedule, you get whether you want to specify a particular time at which these scaling events need to happen, or you can set a recurring schedule that you need to repeat at a specific days, and then you select the time zone, and then you select the day on which the scaling needs to happen. If you know that your application experiences more load at a certain time of the day, so you can define a scaling schedule that the virtual machine scale set increases the number of virtual machines at that particular time of the day. So friends, I hope you now understand why all these three statements were correct, and you also understand how a virtual machine scale set works. If you still have any doubts, please post them in the comments section. You can have two Azure storage accounts that have the same name in the same Azure subscription. Friends, this statement is incorrect. The next statement is you can have two Azure storage accounts that have the same name in different Azure regions. This statement is also incorrect. And the third statement is you can have two Azure storage accounts that have the same name in different Azure subscriptions. And friends, this statement is also incorrect. So friends, I am now on the Microsoft documentation regarding the storage account name. And this says when naming your storage account, keep these rules in mind. Storage account names must be between 3 and 24 characters in length and may contain numbers and lower case letters only. And the second requirement is your storage account name must be unique within Azure. No two storage accounts can have the same name. This is the reason all the three statements were incorrect. There cannot be two storage accounts with same name across the Azure globally, irrespective of whether you are creating storage accounts into subscriptions, or you are creating storage accounts within the same subscription, or you are creating storage accounts into different Azure regions. They cannot have same name globally. So that is why all of the three statements were incorrect. And you can see there is another rule that you need to keep in mind. So you should be across this rule, as well as there can be different questions based on this rule. Azure Arc can manage physical servers that run Linux. This statement is correct, my friends. Azure Arc can manage physical servers that run Linux. Next statement is Azure Arc can manage Azure Kubernetes clusters at scale. This statement is also correct. Let's look at third statement. Azure Arc can manage a third-party database solution hosted outside of Azure. This statement is incorrect. Currently, Azure Arc allows you to manage the following resource types hosted outside of Azure. The first one is servers. Manage Windows and Linux physical servers and virtual machines hosted outside of Azure. This is the reason why the first statement was correct. And the second one is related to Kubernetes clusters. Attach and configure Kubernetes clusters running anywhere with multiple supported distributions. This is the reason which led to choosing second statement as the correct answer. Now the third one here is Azure Data Services. Run Azure Data Services on-premise, at the edge, and in public clouds using Kubernetes and the infrastructure of your choice. SQL managed instance and PostgreSQL preview services are currently available. So friends, there is no statement related to this in our current question, but you should know about it, as this can form a different variation to the question. The next one is related to SQL servers. Extend Azure services to SQL Server instances hosted outside of Azure. Now, friends, this is related to the third statement that we have in the question, but it is specifically talking about SQL Server. However, the statement in our question was talking about third-party database solutions, which is a lot more than SQL Server. That's why we have chosen that this statement is incorrect, because as per the documentation, only SQL Server is supported. And there was a mention of PostgreSQL in the previous data services section, so we would consider PostgreSQL as well supported, but the third-party databases are a lot more than just SQL Server and PostgreSQL. That is why this statement is incorrect. And the final statement here is virtual machines. Provision, resize, delete, and manage virtual machines based on VMware vSphere or Azure Stack at CI, and enable VM self-service through role-based access. So these are all what is supported by Azure Arc currently. This is question number 296. And again, in this question, you need to read few statements and you need to select whether this statement is right or wrong. And the first statement is a network security group will block all network traffic by default. This statement is incorrect. We'll look at more detail on why we have chosen these statements as right or wrong in few minutes by going into the Azure portal. Meanwhile, let's look at second statement. Application security groups can be specified as part of network security group rules. This statement is correct, my friends. And the third statement is network security groups always include inbound security rules and outbound security rules. This is also correct. So friends, as I said earlier, we are now in Azure portal and we will try to validate all the three statements which we just went through. In preparation of that, we will first create a network security group. So how we do it? We go into the network security wizard, we click on create new, we select a resource group where our network security group is going to stay. We'll probably name it test NSG, and we'll create it in the Southeast Asia region. We are not going to assign it any tags. Let's click review and create. So this is running a validation at the moment, and the validation has passed. We will hit create now, and the network security group should be created in few minutes. So friends, the deployment has got completed. We now have a network security group created. We'll just click on go to resource, and here you can see a network security group has got created successfully. Now comes the part to validate the statements. The first statement was a network security group will block all network traffic by default. However, here you can see with the network security group, you have few inbound and outbound rules created by default where an allow part is there. Like in the inbound security rules, you have two allow rules created by default, which is allow VNet inbound and allow Azure load balancer. And then similarly in the outbound security rules as well, you have two default allow groups created. That is the reason the statement was incorrect. Now going to the second, before going to the second statement, let's validate the third statement, which was saying network security group always includes inbound and outbound security rules, which you would already know by now. There are some inbound and outbound security rules which have been created by default. So this statement is correct. Now the second statement was application security groups can be specified as part of network security group rules. So to validate that let's go to inbound security rules and try to create a inbound security rule. Now when you add a inbound security rule in the source, you get option to select application security group as well. This is the reason we have chosen second statement as correct. Now friends, while we are in this wizard, you have other options to choose as well in source. So for example, you wanted to allow connectivity from the whole internet. So you would choose service tag here, which gives you option to choose internet, virtual network, Azure load balancer, and those sort of things. So if you are someone who has very limited knowledge of network security groups, then this wizard is something which will tell you about how you use network security groups. If you select my IP address, it will choose your public IP address by default. And then if you choose IP addresses, you get to specify a CIDR range of the IP addresses from which you want to allow or deny connectivity. You get to choose the protocols, you get to choose the destination port ranges, and then you can create the rule by clicking add. Similarly, if we go to the outbound security rules, if you just click on add, again, the options are same. It's just that the earlier you were creating inbound security rule and now you're going to create a outbound security rule. Again, you will be presented with a series of statements and you need to tell whether these statements are correct or incorrect. You can deploy Azure Resource Manager templates by using the Azure portal. And this statement is correct. The next statement is Azure Resource Manager templates can define infrastructure by using code. This is also correct. And the third and final statement is each Azure resource to be deployed requires a separate Azure Resource Manager template. This statement is incorrect. You can use one template to create multiple Azure resources. If you have not used ARM templates till now, go through my previous videos where I have used ARM templates to create different resources in a same ARM template. One of the example could be you are trying to create a virtual machine, and as part of virtual machine creation, you create lots of dependencies, which includes public IP address or network interface card or storage or disk. Lots of dependent things need to be created first. That is why this statement is incorrect, because you really don't need different ARM templates to create different resources. Azure Sentinel stores collected events in an Azure storage account. This statement is incorrect. By default, logs ingested into Microsoft Sentinel are stored in Azure Monitor Log Analytics workspace. Second statement is Azure Sentinel can remediate incidents automatically. This statement is correct. Azure Sentinel has the capability to automate the remediation of security incidents through its automated playbooks and workflows. These playbooks can be configured to respond to specific type of incidents and take actions automatically based on predefined rules and conditions. Third statement is Azure Sentinel can collect Windows Defender firewall logs from Azure virtual machines. And friends, Azure Sentinel has the ability to collect Windows Defender firewall logs from the Azure virtual machines. It does that using its integration with Azure Monitor, which is the monitoring and logging service in Azure that collects data from various Azure resources, including virtual machines. And your first statement is adding more RAM to a virtual machine is an example of horizontal scaling. And friends, this statement is incorrect. Adding more RAM is an example of vertical scaling. Second statement is adding an additional virtual machine based upon demand is an example of vertical scaling. Friends, this statement is also incorrect. It is an example of horizontal scaling. Now, friends, you would have seen both these statements given were incorrect. In the first part, they were talking about horizontal scaling, but it turned out to be an example of vertical scaling. Whereas in second statement, they were talking about vertical scaling, and it turned out to be an example of horizontal scaling. So you should definitely know what is horizontal scaling and what is vertical scaling, as people tend to get confused between these two terms. But if you have any doubts in these two terms, then post them in the comment section and I'll try to clarify them as soon as possible. Now, the third statement is horizontal scaling can occur automatically or manually. This statement is correct. You have both options to set up triggers for auto scale or scale things manually. So friends, this is question number 311 of the series. And in this question, we'll go through a series of statements and verify whether these statements are correct or not. And the first statement is an Azure resource can have multiple delete logs. This statement is correct. The next statement is an Azure resource inherits log from its resource group. This statement is also correct. And the third and final statement is if an Azure resource has a read-only lock, you can add a delete lock to the resource. This statement is also correct. Friends, let's now head to Azure portal to verify the chosen options. So friends, the first statement was an Azure resource can have multiple delete locks. So now I'm in Azure portal. In front of you is a storage account. Let's go to the locks section of this storage account and try to apply multiple delete locks on this. And you can see there is no lock currently applied to it. So what we'll do is click on add. Let's give it a name as delete lock 1 and lock type is delete. And you can see the first lock has now been applied. Let's give it one more refresh. You can see first lock is applied. Now let's try to apply another delete lock. Let's name it delete lock 2 and the lock type is again delete. And you can see it has allowed us to apply it without any errors. That means you can apply multiple delete locks on a single resource. This is why the first statement was correct. Let's now delete them and try to validate the next statement. The second statement was an Azure resource inherits lock from its resource group. So friends, at the moment you can see Cloud Shell Storage 1407 does not have any locks associated to it. Now what we will do is we will try to apply a lock on the resource group where this resource is hosted, and the resource is hosted in resource group named Cloud Shell 1407. We'll go to the locks section of this resource group and apply a lock at resource group level. So let's probably name the lock as read only lock because this will help us in answering the next question as well. So read only lock and the lock type is read only. Let's click OK and you can see the lock has now been applied on the resource group. So what we'll do now is we'll go to the resource and see whether the lock got inherited or not. So here we are in Cloud Shell Storage 1407. Let's go to the locks section. Let's try to hit refresh, and you can see there is a read-only lock which has been applied, and the scope is Cloud Shell 1407, which is the resource group. If you apply a lock directly to the resource, then the scope is resource itself, but this lock is getting inherited from the resource group. That's why it is showing as Cloud Shell 1407 in the scope. And here you can see parent resource locks can't be edited here. Click on the locks scope to go to that scope. If I try to delete it from here, you can see it is grayed out. I'm trying to click and nothing is happening. So this validates the second statement that an Azure resource inherits lock from its resource group. Now the third statement was if an Azure resource has a read-only lock, you can add a delete lock to the resource. So friends, the reason why I chose read-only lock in the previous one was because the third statement was validating whether if a read-only lock is already applied, whether can you apply a delete lock or not. So let's now try to add a new lock at the resource level, which is Cloud Shell Storage 1407. Let's name it delete lock. And the lock type is delete. And here you can see we were able to successfully apply the lock. That means the third statement is also correct. If you have a read-only lock applied, you can also apply a delete lock. And you would notice the changes in the scope here because the lock was applied directly at the resource level. So its scope is Cloud Shell Storage 140, whereas the other lock's scope was Cloud Shell 1407, which is the resource group. And you can see I am able to delete the lock here because this is not an inherited lock. So friends, I hope you now understand why all the three statements were correct here. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comment section. The first statement is adding resource groups in an Azure subscription generates additional costs. And friends, this statement is incorrect. No matter how many resource groups you create in an Azure subscription, you do not incur any additional costs. Only the costs are incurred if you are trying to create resources within those resource groups. And the next statement is copying 10 GB of data to Azure from an on-premise network over a VPN generates additional Azure data transfer costs. And friends, this statement is incorrect because you are moving data into Azure from your on-premise network. You won't be charged for it. You can transfer whatever amount of data you want from on-premise to Azure without paying anything. And the third statement is copying 10 GB of data from Azure to an on-premise network over a VPN generates additional Azure data transfer costs. And friends, this statement is correct because here you are moving data outside of Azure, and for that you are always billed. Whether you are moving data from Azure to on-premise or you are moving data from one region of Azure to another region of Azure, you will incur charges. The charges you incur depends on how you are moving data. If you are enjoying the content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. For access to the full set of questions in PDF format, join the channel as a gold member and email me at devopshub2023@gmail.com requesting the PDF copy. Let's now get back to the questions. And the first statement is Azure Functions is an example of platform as a service PaaS cloud service model. And this statement is correct. Now the next statement is Microsoft 365 is an example of a software as a service cloud service model. This statement is also correct. Let's look at third statement. An Azure virtual machine is an example of infrastructure as a service IaaS cloud service model. This statement is also correct, my friends. Friends, if you have doubts in cloud computing service models, which are platform as a service, software as a service, or infrastructure as a service, I already have a detailed video around this on my channel. So do not forget to go through that video to clarify your doubts around cloud computing service models. And the first statement is cloud computing offers lower capital expenditure, which is CapEx costs, than on-premise deployments. This statement is correct, my friends. In fact, when you move from on-premise to cloud, then you move away from CapEx and are more aligned to OpEx model, which is operational expenditure. And the next statement is cloud computing provides the same configuration options as on-premise deployments. I think this statement is incorrect. You can't run any legacy systems in cloud, whereas you have full control in on-premise and can run whatever configuration needed by the application, which is why, as per me, this statement is incorrect. Now, the third statement is cloud computing can scale when a business requires change. This statement is correct, my friends, and this is one of the biggest advantage of moving from on-prem to cloud. This is question number 321 of the series. In this question, we are going through a series of statements which would be based around platform as a service cloud computing model. So the first statement is creating and configuring a virtual network is part of the platform as a service cloud service model. Friends, this statement is incorrect. Creating and configuring a virtual network typically falls under the infrastructure as a service cloud service model rather than platform as a service model. The next statement is in the platform as a service cloud service model, updating code for an Azure web app is the customer's responsibility. Friends, this statement is correct. Updating and maintaining the code is always customer's responsibility. And the third statement is configuring user access to a platform as a service cloud service model is the customer's responsibility. This statement is also correct. You are responsible for setting up and managing user access in platform as a service model. And the first statement is network security groups can contain multiple inbound and outbound security rules. This statement is correct, my friends. We have already seen this in one of the practicals done previously in the series that NSG can have multiple inbound and outbound security rules. Now, the next statement is a VM that performs a particular function, such as running a firewall, is also called as network virtual appliance. This statement is correct. A virtual machine that is dedicated to performing a specific network-related function, such as running a firewall, is often referred to as Network Virtual Appliance, also called as NVA. Third statement is a user-defined route UDR can only control network traffic between subnets of a single virtual network. This statement is incorrect. A user-defined route, UDR, in cloud computing refers to the ability of user to define specific routes for network traffic within a virtual network. Contrary to the statement provided, a UDR is not limited to controlling network traffic between subnets of a single virtual network. Instead, it allows users to control traffic flows between subnets within the same virtual network as well as between virtual networks. And the first statement is Microsoft Defender for Cloud can monitor Azure resources and on-premise resources. This statement is correct, my friends. We will go through the Microsoft documentation shortly to understand and validate these statements in detail. And the second statement is all Microsoft Defender for Cloud features are free. This statement is incorrect. Let's look at third statement. For Defender for Cloud, you can download a regulatory compliance report. This statement is correct. So friends, we are in the common questions about Defender for Cloud section from Microsoft. And let's go through the section where it says, is there a trial version of Defender for Cloud? Now, Defender for Cloud is free for the first 30 days. Any usage beyond 30 days is automatically charged as per the pricing scheme. There is also a note that malware scanning in Defender for storage is not included for free in the first 30 days trial and will be charged from the first day. So friends, even though you get a 30 days free trial, but as per this statement, you can see Defender for storage is not free from first day itself. You start paying for it from first day. And even though the trial is there, it is just there for 30 days. So this validates the statement that all the Microsoft Defender for Cloud features are not free. Now let's go through this next section, which Azure resources are monitored by Microsoft Defender for Cloud. The Microsoft Defender for Cloud monitors the following Azure resources. So first we have a list of Azure resources which says virtual machines, including cloud services, virtual machine scale sets, the many Azure PaaS services listed in the products overview section. So friends, apart from virtual machines and virtual machine scale sets, it can also monitor some of the PaaS services. To see the list, you need to go through this documentation link. Now, Defender for Cloud also protects on-premise resources and multi-cloud resources, including Amazon AWS and Google Cloud. So friends, this validates that you can use Microsoft Defender for Cloud to monitor Azure resources as well as on-premise resources. Now, if the question is twisted a bit, they can also have references to Amazon AWS and Google Cloud because it does support monitoring the infrastructure which are hosted in multi-cloud. We'll again go through a series of statements, and these statements this time are focused around Azure Advisor. The first statement is Azure Advisor provides personalized recommendations. And this is correct. Azure Advisor provides personalized recommendations to help optimize your Azure resources and improve the performance, security, and reliability of your workloads. The recommendations provided by Azure Advisor are personalized to your specific usage patterns and resource configurations, taking into account factors such as the size and complexity of your environment, your usage patterns, and your business goals. This ensures that the recommendations are relevant and actionable and can help you improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your Azure deployment. The second statement is Azure Advisor can provide cost recommendations for virtual machines. This statement is also correct, my friends. Some of the examples of recommendations provided by Azure Advisor include optimizing virtual machine sizes to reduce costs, enabling security features such as Azure Security Centers, improving network performance by optimizing network security groups, and reducing downtime by setting up automated backups. And the third statement is Azure Advisor can provide recommendations across multiple subscriptions. Friends, this statement is also correct. So friends, Advisor gives you the ability to select subscriptions and resource groups that matter to you and your organization. You only see recommendations for the subscriptions and resource groups that you select. By default, all are selected. Configuration settings apply to the subscription or resource group. So the same setting apply to everyone that has access to that subscription or resource group. Configuration settings can be changed in Azure portal or programmatically. Now, how do you change or configure those settings? In the Advisor, you go to the configuration sections, and there you can see everything is listed as you can see in this screenshot. So by default, you can see there are two subscriptions that are in picture here, which is Contoso Hotels Limited and Pay As You Go. And under Contoso Hotels Limited, you have two resource groups named as Management and Testing, and by default, all are selected. And you do have option to unselect or to select whatever you want your advisor to recommend you based on. So friends, this validates the statement that you can use Azure Advisor and it to have recommendations across multiple Azure subscriptions. So folks, in question number 332, we are going to validate a set of statements related to Azure Virtual Desktop. And the first statement is an Azure Virtual Desktop session host can run Windows 10 or Windows 11 only. This statement is incorrect. Keyword to answer this question is the word only, as Azure Virtual Desktop supports multiple versions of Windows Server as well as in addition to Windows 10 and Windows 11. Now, the next statement is an Azure virtual desktop host pool that includes 20 session hosts supports maximum of 20 simultaneous user connections. This statement is also incorrect. Let's now look at third and final statement before heading to official documentation to validate the chosen options. Azure Virtual Desktop supports desktop and app virtualization. This statement is correct, my friends. So friends, we are now in the operating system and licenses section for Azure Virtual Desktops, and you can see you have a choice of operating systems that you can use for session hosts to provide desktop and applications. You can use different operating systems with different host pools to provide flexibility to your users. We support the 64-bit operating systems and SKUs in the following table, where supported versions and dates are in line with the Microsoft lifecycle policy. So friends, with every operating system, there is a lifecycle policy that Microsoft defines that till a certain date, they'll provide the support for that operating system. So if any operating system is listed here, but it doesn't fall in the Microsoft lifecycle policy, then it will not be supported. But the main crust of this statement or this table is that the operating systems that are currently supported as of when I'm recording this video is Windows 11, which is Windows 11 Enterprise Multi-Session, Windows 11 Enterprise, Windows 10, Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. These were mentioned in our question statement, and there was a word that was only. That's what has invalidated the statement, because if you scroll down, you can see Windows Server 2022, Windows Server 2019, and Windows Server 2016 are also supported. So if the statement was the virtual desktop session host can run Windows 10 or Windows 11, then you would have probably answered it yes. But since they added a word only, which has invalidated the statement. Now going through the overview section of Azure Virtual Desktop. As you can see, Azure Virtual Desktop is a desktop and app virtualization service that runs on Azure. This itself validates the third statement that was asked in the question, that yes, Azure Virtual Desktop supports desktop and app virtualization. Here are some of the key highlights. Deliver a full Windows experience with Windows 11, Windows 10, or Windows Server. Again, this also validates one of our statement, as Windows Server is highlighted here. Though they have not mentioned all the versions that are currently supported, but at least there is a mention of Windows Server. Use single session to assign devices to a single user or use multi-sessions for scalability. Now, friends, the second statement which we had in our question, it said an Azure Virtual Desktop host pool that includes 20 session hosts supports maximum of 20 simultaneous user connections. And here you can see, based on this statement, we can say that the given statement in the question is incorrect, because for multi-session, you have scalability. So it doesn't say that if you have 20 session hosts, then you can just have 20 simultaneous user connections. Now, other highlights are offer full desktops or use remote app to deliver individual apps, present Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise and optimize it to run in multi-user virtual scenarios. Install your line of business or custom apps you can run from anywhere, including apps in the formats Win32, MSIX, and AppX. Deliver software as a service for external usage, replace existing remote desktop service deployments, manage desktops and apps from different Windows and Windows Server operating systems with a unified management experience. And the first statement is ExpressRoute uses Border Gateway Protocol, which is BGP. This statement is correct. Microsoft uses BGP, an industry standard dynamic routing protocol, to exchange routes between your on-premise network, your instances in Azure, and Microsoft public addresses. They can establish multiple BGP sessions with your network for different traffic profiles. And the second statement is ExpressRoute uses the internet to connect an on-premise network to Azure. This statement is incorrect. ExpressRoute lets you extend your on-premise networks into Microsoft over a private connection with the help of a connectivity provider. ExpressRoute connections offer more reliability, faster speed, consistent latencies, and higher security than typical connections over the internet because they don't go over public internet. If you are using public internet to connect your on-premise network to Azure, then it is VPN, not ExpressRoute. And the third statement is you can configure multiple ExpressRoute circuits to connect an on-premise data center to Azure. Friends, we already validated this statement when I was going through ExpressRoute uses border gateway protocol, and this statement is correct. Microsoft offers multiple ExpressRoute peering locations in many geopolitical regions. To ensure maximum resiliency, Microsoft recommends that you connect to two ExpressRoute circuits in two peering locations. For non-production and non-critical workloads, you can achieve standard resiliency by connecting to a single ExpressRoute circuit that offers redundant connections within a single peering locations. So the bottom line is you can configure multiple ExpressRoute circuits. However, if you are using your non-critical or non-productionized applications, then you could set up a single ExpressRoute connection to achieve standard resiliency. But for the production and critical workloads and to achieve maximum resiliency, Microsoft recommends you connect two ExpressRoute circuits to two peering locations. We are going to go through another set of statements, and this time they are related to Azure policies. And the first statement is you can assign an Azure policy to a virtual machine. This statement is correct. Policy definition or initiative can be assigned to any scope of resources that Azure supports, such as management groups, subscriptions, resource groups, or even individual resources. Next statement is if an Azure policy is assigned to a resource group, non-compliant resources are removed from the group. This statement is incorrect. If the policy has a remediation action defined, then it will remediate the existing resources. Otherwise, the existing resources will be marked as non-compliant and no action will be taken. And the third statement is, if an Azure policy is assigned to a resource group, only compliant resources can be deployed to the group. This statement is correct. Once the policy has taken effect, then you can only deploy resources which are compliant. That is, if they do not fulfill the criteria defined in the Azure policy, your validation of the deployment will fail and you won't be able to create the deployment. Hence, you won't be able to deploy the resources. Question number 343, we will validate a set of statements which are related to Azure storage account. And the first statement is the archive access tier for Azure storage can be set at the account level. This statement is incorrect, my friends. You can set hot or cool access tier at storage account level. However, archive access tier can only be set at the blob level. The next statement is the cool access tier offers the lowest costs for storing blobs in Azure storage. You would obviously know that this statement is incorrect, as archive access tier is the cheapest among all the options available. And the third statement is, after blobs are uploaded to an Azure storage container, the access tier of the storage account can be changed. This statement is correct, my friends. You can change the access tier of a storage account from hot to cold or vice versa even after blobs have been uploaded to a container. So friends, to validate the chosen options, we are now in the Azure portal. In front of you is the configuration section of a storage account. And the first statement was the archive access tier for Azure storage can be set at the account level, for which we have chosen this is the incorrect statement. Now, if you scroll down through the configuration settings, you can see blob access tier default section, and it only has hot and cool options. If you click on the exclamation mark, you can see the account access tier is the default tier that is inferred by any blob without any explicitly setting tier. The hot access tier is ideal for frequently accessed data. The cool access tier is ideal for infrequently accessed data. And the cold access tier is ideal for rarely accessed data. Now there comes the statement. The archive access tier can only be set at the blob level and not on the account. So friend, this is what has helped us in confirming that you cannot set access tier at the storage account level. Rather, you will have to set it at the blob level. Now, the second statement was the cool access tier offers the lowest costs for storing blobs in Azure storage. We really can't validate it in the Azure portal itself, but obviously you can go to the Microsoft documentation to understand more about it. This is the page which will tell you about the pricing tiers that are applicable. As you can see, this is evident from the pay-as-you-go pricing section. If you see, hot tier is 0.018 per GB, whereas archive tier is 0.00099 per GB, which pretty much tells you what I was telling, that cool access tier is not the cheapest one, rather archive access tier is the cheapest one. Though when you use archive tier, the cost to store data reduces, but the cost to retrieve data increases. So you have to be mindful when you are choosing the different type of storage access tiers. Now, the third statement was after blobs are uploaded to an Azure storage container, the access tier of the storage account can be changed. So, folks, what we'll try to do is we will try to upload a blob to a container in this storage account, and then we'll come back to the storage account and try to change its access tier. So, currently the access tier is set to hot. Let's go to a container and try to upload something and see whether we can change it after that or not. So let's click on the containers section, and I do not have any container at the moment. So let's create one container and name it test container. So you can see the container has got created and it is currently empty. So let's try to upload a blob and do the further steps to validate the statement. What we'll do is we'll click on upload, we'll browse for files, and we'll select an image for this instance and hit upload. So you can see the image has got uploaded and the access tier shows as hot inferred. That means it is getting inherited from the storage account level. So let's go ahead and try to change that on the storage account level to validate our statement. What we'll do is again, we'll go to the configuration section of the storage account and we will set it to cool this time. And this just gives a little warning, I would say. Changing the access tier may result in additional charges, but we are moving from hot to cool, so it's not going to increase the cost, rather it's going to decrease the cost. Let's click on save, and it's doing its magic in the background, and the tier has now changed to cool. Let's go back to the container and try to see what's showing up there. We have already validated our statement. You can see the blob was uploaded and we are still able to change the storage account here from the settings, configuration settings. And here you can see now it is showing as cool inferred. So friends, I hope you now understand why different options were chosen as the right or wrong answers. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comment section. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And the first statement is pay-as-you-go PG is a consumption-based model. This statement is correct. Pay-as-you-go is a consumption-based model as you only pay for the resources you use. The second statement is payments to cloud service providers are considered capital expenditure or CapEx. This statement is incorrect. Those payments are considered as operational expenditure. And the third and final statement here is the services provided through a consumption-based model are considered operational expenditure OPEX. This statement is correct. All the three statements are related to cloud computing, and that means you should be thinking about operational expenditure and pay-as-you-go pricing model. We'll again go through a series of statements, and you need to tell whether those statements are right or wrong. And the first statement is an Azure subscription can be associated with multiple Entra ID tenants. This statement is incorrect, folks. An Entra ID tenant can have multiple subscriptions, but an Azure subscription can only be associated with one tenant. Now, the next statement is you can change the Entra ID tenant to which an Azure subscription is associated. This statement is correct. To make management easier, you can transfer a subscription to a different Microsoft Entra directory if needed. However, when you transfer a subscription to a different Microsoft Entra directory, some resources are not transferred to the target directory. For example, all role assignments and custom roles in Azure RBAC are permanently deleted from the source directory and are not transferred to your target directory. Then the next statement is when an Azure subscription expires, the associated Entra ID tenant is deleted automatically. This statement is incorrect. All Azure subscriptions have a trust relationship with a Microsoft Entra tenant. Subscriptions rely on this tenant to authenticate and authorize security principals and devices. And when a subscription expires, the trusted instance remains, but the security principals lose access to Azure resources, meaning you can associate and manage the directory using a different Azure subscription. Friends, this is question number 371 of the series, where we are going to look at series of statements related to total cost of ownership, which is TCO calculator. And the first statement is total cost of ownership calculator displays the cost of running workloads in a data center. This statement is correct, my friends. TCO calculator typically displays the cost of running workloads in a data center. It takes into account various factors such as hardware cost, software licenses, maintenance, energy consumption, cooling, staffing, and other operational expenses to provide a comprehensive view of the total cost associated with running a workload over its lifetime. Then the next statement is TCO calculator displays the cost of running workloads in Azure. This statement is also correct, friends. TCO displays the cost of running workloads in Azure as well. It factors in various Azure services, pricing models, and usage patterns to estimate the total cost associated with deploying and managing workloads on the Azure cloud platform. And the third and final statement is TCO calculator generates graphical reports. This statement is also correct. TCO does generate graphical reports. These reports visually represent cost breakdowns, comparisons, and other relevant data to help users understand the financial implications of deploying workloads on the Azure platform. And the first statement is you must install Azure Cloud Shell on your computer before you can use it. This statement is incorrect, folks. Azure Cloud Shell is a browser-based shell experience provided by Microsoft Azure, so you do not need to install it on your computer. It can be accessed directly from the Azure portal, enabling you to manage your Azure resources using command line tools without requiring any local installation. Now, the next statement is the Azure command line interface, which is CLI, is installed by default on Windows 11. This statement is also incorrect. Azure CLI is not installed by default on Windows 11. Azure CLI is a cross-platform command line tool that can be installed locally on Windows computers. For Windows, the Azure CLI is installed via MSI or a zip package, which gives you access to the CLI through Windows command prompt or PowerShell, and it is an exclusive installation and doesn't come packaged with OS. Now, the third and final statement is Azure PowerShell can be used on computers that run Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. This statement is correct. Azure PowerShell is available for computers running Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. It is a cross-platform command line tool that allows users to manage Azure resources using PowerShell commands. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And this time we are looking at the statements which are related to Azure Advisor. And your first statement is Azure Advisor supports alerts. This statement is correct, folks. Whenever Azure Advisor detects a new recommendation for one of your resources, an event is stored in Azure Activity Log. You can set up alerts for these events from Azure Advisor using a recommendation-specific alert creation experience. You can select a subscription and optionally a resource group to specify the resources that you want to receive alerts on. Now, the second statement is Azure Advisor recommendations can be filtered by administrative units. This statement is incorrect. Azure Advisor provides recommendations at subscription level and management group, offering guidance on various aspects of your Azure resources and configuration, but there is no option to filter the recommendations at administrative unit level. And the third and final statement is Azure Advisor provides recommendations on improving the performance of resources. This statement is correct. Azure Advisor does provide recommendations on various aspects to help improve the performance, security, reliability, and cost effectiveness of your Azure resources. This includes recommendations related to performance optimization, such as resizing or scaling resources appropriately, tuning configurations for better performance. We are now going to go through a series of statements which are related to Azure Service Health, and you will have to tell whether the statements are right or wrong. And the first statement is, from Azure Service Health, an administrator can view the health of all the services in an Azure environment. This statement is correct. Service Health keeps you informed about the health of your environment. It provides a personalized view of the status of your Azure services and regions, includes information about planned maintenance and current incidents, and offers richer functionality, including alerting and RCAs. Now, the next statement is, from Azure Service Health, an administrator can create a rule to be alerted if an Azure service fails. This statement is also correct. You do have an option to create service health alert and resource health alert to get notified whenever there are any issues happening. And the final statement is, from Azure Service Health, an administrator can prevent a service failure. This statement is incorrect. You can use resource health, which is part of service health, to view the health of a service. However, you cannot use it to prevent a service failure. In question number 381, we are going to go through a series of statements which are revolving around cloud computing, and you need to tell whether these statements are right or wrong. And the first statement is, cloud computing provides elastic scalability. Friends, some of you might be hearing elastic scalability for the first time, as elasticity and scalability separately are used commonly. But yes, elastic scalability is also a valid word. Elastic scalability is the ability to automatically add or remove infrastructure based on changing pattern in traffic. And this statement is correct. You can relate elastic scalability with auto scaling for better understanding. Now, the next statement is, customers can minimize capital expenditure by using a public cloud. This statement is also correct. We have had many similar type of questions in the series, and you should know by now that when you start using cloud computing, then you make a move from capital expenditure towards operational expenditure, which is OPEX. Now, the third statement is, cloud computing leverages virtualization to provide services to multiple customers simultaneously. And this statement is also correct. Virtualization is the core of cloud computing, which is used to provide services to multiple customers simultaneously. And the first statement is, you can associate a network security group to a virtual network subnet. This statement is correct, my friends. You can associate an NSG directly with a virtual network subnet to control traffic to and from all resources within that subnet. And the next statement is you can associate a network security group to a virtual network. Friends, you can't directly associate a network security group to a virtual network in Microsoft Azure. Instead, you associate NSG with subnets within a virtual network, which is what we validated in the previous statement. And the third statement is you can associate a network security group to a network interface. This statement is correct. You can associate a network security group to a network interface in Microsoft Azure. When you associate an NSG with a NIC, the NSG's rule will apply to the traffic flowing through that specific network interface. This allows you to enforce security policies at a more granular level, controlling traffic to and from individual virtual machines or resources associated with that NIC. Friends, let's again head to Azure portal to validate all the three statements. So friends, since we were going to validate the statements around network security group, so let's try to create a network security group, a demo network security group, and validate the chosen options. So I'll just name it demo NSG and create it. All the options are going to stay as the default ones, as we are really not concerned about any of those options at this point. So I have left everything as default and initiated a deployment. As you can see on the top right that the deployment is already in progress. So we should have the NSG created pretty soon, as it is a quick process and doesn't take a lot of time. And as I speak, it has got created successfully. Let's click on go to resource and we should be able to see the NSG. Now, we are not really concerned about any inbound security or outbound security rules at this point. What we will do is in the settings, we will go to network interfaces and see that you can associate it to a network interface. We created a NSG and in that we are getting an option of network interface and we can associate it with a network interface. Now, I do not have any network interface created at this point. So this drop down will be blank for me, but if I had any network interface, it would show up here. Similarly, if I go to subnets, you get an option to associate it with a subnet as well. Similarly, I do not have a virtual network or subnet created at this point. That is why it is not going to show up here. So friends, with this, you can also note when you associate it with subnet, you get an option to choose a virtual network first. And subnet is mandatory, which pretty much confirms that you cannot associate it to just virtual network. You have to filter it down to a subnet level. Let's now head back to our questions. Question number 390. Again, we are going to go through a series of statements. And the first statement is Azure China is operated by Microsoft. This statement is incorrect. Azure China is operated by a partner company named as 21 Wirenet. It is a physically separated instance of cloud services located in China. The next statement is Azure government is operated by Microsoft. This statement is correct. Azure government is indeed operated and fully controlled by Microsoft. And the third statement is Azure government is available only to US government agencies and their partners. This statement is also correct. Azure government is the mission critical cloud delivering breakthrough innovation to US government customers and their partners. Only US federal, state, local, and tribal governments and their partners have access to this dedicated instance, with operations controlled by screened US citizens. And the first statement is to use Microsoft Entra ID credentials to sign in to a computer that runs Windows 11, the computer must be joined to Entra ID. This statement is correct. Main thing in this statement is you need to use the Entra ID credentials to sign in on the machine, and for that very reason, the device must be joined to Entra ID. If the statement is changed slightly and you just need to access the organization's provided apps, then you can achieve this by registering your personal device as well in Entra ID. Now, the second statement is users in Microsoft Entra ID are organized by using resource group. This statement is incorrect. Instead, they are typically organized into groups such as security groups or Microsoft 365 groups. Third statement is Microsoft Entra ID groups support dynamic membership rules. This statement is correct. You can create attribute-based rules to enable dynamic membership for a group in Microsoft Entra ID. Dynamic group membership adds and removes group members automatically using membership rules based on member attributes. When the attributes of a user or a device change, the system evaluates all dynamic group rules in a directory to see if the change would trigger any group addition or removal. If a user or device satisfies a rule on a group, they are added as a member of that group. If they no longer satisfy the rule, they are removed. You cannot manually add or remove a member of a dynamic group. And your first statement is premium storage accounts can be configured as Azure file shares. This statement is correct. You can configure premium storage accounts as Azure file shares. Now, the next statement is premium storage accounts can be configured as block blob storage. Friends, this is also correct. We will shortly view the Microsoft documentation to understand why these statements are right or wrong. But before that, let's look at third statement, which is premium storage accounts can be configured as storage v2 storage. And friends, this statement is incorrect. Let's now head to Microsoft documentation to understand why first two statements are correct and the third statement is incorrect. And then we will also see at different options which can form different variations of the questions. So friends, let's go through this table where we are talking about types of storage accounts, and this table has the usage section as well. We'll look at standard general purpose v2 later on. Let's first look at premium section because that's where our question was revolving around. So the first one is premium block blobs. And in the usage section, it says premium storage account type for block blobs and append blobs. Now, our second statement in our question was talking about premium storage accounts can be configured as block blob storage. This is what validates the second statement. Now, with this, we have also got a different variation of this question. Suppose the question was talking about premium storage accounts can be configured as append blobs, then yes, that statement was also correct. Now, let's scroll down to premium file shares. Premium storage account type for the file shares only. This validates our first statement, which was talking about premium storage accounts can be configured as Azure file shares. Now, friends, the third option regarding premium storage accounts here is premium page blobs. Premium storage account type for page blobs only. So this again makes a variation of the statement that we had. For example, in your exam, if you get a statement saying that premium storage accounts can be configured as page blob storage, then yes, that statement is correct. Now, there is no further mention around premium storage accounts. So the third statement, which was in our question, premium storage accounts can be configured as storage version 2 storage, is incorrect because there is no mention about it in the Microsoft documentation. Before we proceed further in the series, friends, let's also look at standard general purpose v2, the standard storage account type for blobs, file shares, queues, and tables. Now, if you have a similar type of question where instead of premium storage accounts, they are talking about standard storage account, then you should know that they can be used or they can be configured as blobs, file shares, queues, and tables. So friends, in this question, we have almost seen that there can be 5 to 6 variations of this question. So I would highly recommend you to go through the documentation that I have just shared to understand this in more detail. And so you are covered if you get different variations to this question. This is question number 401 of the series, where we are going to look at series of statements which are revolving around Azure Virtual Network, and you need to validate whether the statements are right or wrong. And the first statement is Azure virtual networks deployed to the same Azure region are connected by default. This is an incorrect statement, friends. You will need to establish required connectivity using VNet peering or any other available networking options. Now, the next statement is virtual networks created in the same Azure resource group must have unique names. And this statement is correct. You can't create two virtual networks with same name in the same resource group. And the next statement is the Azure Virtual Network's address space must be unique within a subscription. This statement is incorrect. You can have multiple virtual networks with same address space within a subscription. However, you cannot peer two VNets with same address space. Let's now head to Azure portal to understand and validate these statements in more detail. So friends, to validate these statements, what I have done is I have created two virtual networks with the name of VNet1 and VNet2, and both of them are currently hosted in Southeast Asia location. So the first statement was Azure virtual networks deployed to the same Azure region are connected by default. So let's head to VNet1 and try to set up peering. If the option for VNet2 shows up, then that means they are not connected by default. So I'm currently in the peering options of VNet1. What I'll try to do is I'll hit add and try to add VNet2 and see whether that virtual network is showing up or not. So we don't really need to add the peering link name for the current virtual network and remote virtual network for this demonstration, because we are not actually going to set up peering. What we are trying to do is we'll see whether the VNet2 is showing up here or not. So my default subscription is selected by default here because I just have one subscription. Now in VNets, I can see that VNet2 is also showing up. That means these both of the virtual networks, even though they are deployed in the same Azure region, are not connected by default. Now, with this demonstration, we can also validate the statement third, that the Azure virtual network address space must be unique within a subscription. Friends, both of my virtual networks, as you can see in this error message, are using address space of 10.0.0.0/16, and there is no issue. I was able to create two virtual networks with same address space in a same subscription. That confirms that the third statement in our question is not correct. The error that is showing up here is showing up in while I'm doing peering. You cannot peer two virtual networks with same address space. So friends, this can form a variation of this question. In your exam, you could have a statement where it was probably mentioned that you can peer two virtual networks with same address space, and this statement would be false. Now let's validate the statement 2, which was virtual networks created in the same resource group must have unique name. Now at the moment, I have just two virtual networks created, VNet1 and VNet2. However, they are with different names, so that is why we don't have any issues. So what I'll do is I'll try to create a virtual network and see what all options I get. So I have chosen same resource group, which is Cloud Shell 1407. And now I'll put in a name which will be same to the name of the resource group, which already exists in this resource group. And you can see there is already an error showing up. There is already a virtual network with the name VNet1 in the current resource group. Now, as soon as I change the name, the error goes away. So this pretty much confirms that you cannot have virtual networks with the same name in the same resource group. And the first statement is a company can extend an internal network its own physical servers to the public cloud. This statement is incorrect. You can extend a private cloud by deploying virtual servers in a public cloud, but you can't add physical servers to the public cloud. The next statement is a private cloud must be disconnected from the internet. This is also an incorrect statement. A private cloud can be disconnected from the internet, but it's not a requirement. Whether it's connected to the internet or not depends on the specific requirements and security policies of the organization. Now, the third statement is Part of hybrid cloud is the public cloud. This is a valid statement. Public cloud and private cloud together form hybrid cloud. So friends, before we proceed forward and look at question number 405, if you are looking to gain access to the PDF version of all the questions that have been covered in the series till now, then do not forget to join the channel as a gold member and email me at devopshub2023@gmail.com requesting PDF copy. And the first statement is you must have physical servers to use cloud computing. This is an incorrect statement. Cloud computing services provide virtualized resources such as virtual machine storage and networking, which are hosted on physical servers managed by the cloud service provider. Users access and manage these resources through a web-based interface or API without needing to directly manage physical servers. Now, the next statement is you must have internet connectivity to use cloud computing. This is also an incorrect statement, folks. In case of Azure, you can access the services through a dedicated connection like Azure Express route, where you access Azure services over a private connection with the help of a connectivity provider. Now, the third statement is the cost to increase cloud computing capacity are less than the costs to increase the computing capacity of an on-premise data center. This is a correct statement, folks. The cost to increase cloud computing capacity are less than the cost to increase the computing capacity of an on-premise data center. This is because cloud computing services offer pay-as-you-go pricing models, allowing organizations to scale resources up or down based on demand, without the need for significant upfront investments in hardware and infrastructure. And the first statement is only one tag can be assigned to an Azure resource. This is an incorrect statement. You can assign multiple tags to a single Azure resource, making it easier to filter, search, and manage resources within your Azure environment. Now, the next statement is tags can be assigned to Azure resources by using Azure Resource Manager templates. This is a correct statement. Tags can be specified within ARM templates to help organize and manage resources effectively. Now, the third and final statement is tags can be used to enforce naming standards for Azure resources. This is an incorrect statement, folks. You would typically use Azure policy to enforce any naming standards. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this video, folks. Do not forget to explore other parts of the series to get the maximum benefit from our content. And stay tuned for more parts in our Azure Fundamentals exam practice question series.